We start back on Brendok 16 years prior to current events, as a group of local space cops called Jedi are researching a bunch of rocks and plants. And also killing time by doing some sort of metal detecting, I guess. As the moany white Padawan called Torbin just whines about wanting to go home to Coruscant already. Or given he's stuck in the woods with a giant hairy Bigfoot fella, a small Asian who can barely speak English, and his strict boss who's been making him catalogue random shit for 7 weeks without telling him why. But a young Master Soul says, we're here on this once dead planet looking for something called a Vergence, bro. Which is a super important concentration of force energy centred around a certain location and what can totally create life. And before he can say, well, that's what we have women for, ain't it? Soul spots 2 little girls playing in the woods. And whilst I try and get over some seriously worrying deja vu vibes here, we see that it's the exact same scenes playing out from the 3rd episode, but now from the Jedi perspective. And before I can say, oh god, please don't let us have to relive the single worst television episode of the year all over again, we cut to the main titles, as Soul follows them back to their gaff and soon goes full Spider-Man to break in. And before you can say, what's the point of a giant fuck-off door and wall if any small Asian could just climb up the side of it, he soon sees there's a whole community of lesbo space witches teaching little kiddies how to fight and physically assaulting them and shit. So after rushing back to tell his mates all about his mental findings, Indara tells him to go back to the ship and have a lie down, son, because you're clearly off your rocker talking about lesbo space witches climbing up massive walls like Spider-Man and stuff. But he just says no chance, love, because those kids are in grave danger, given said saucy witches are preparing for some dodgy ceremony tonight. So she humours him to get him to shut up already. And once inside, we once again see them meet the Coven, as we also now see how they went inside poor Torbin's head and offered him the power to grant a wish or some shit. And instead of asking for a better haircut or an all-night gangbang with the Coven, he just says he wants to go home already after 7 weeks camping out in the woods and sharing small tents with a 7-foot hairy furball. Later, the creepy Asian fella, what loves lurking behind trees and spying on literal miners whilst also keeping holograms of them in his pocket for years, says he's randomly obsessed with this Osha kid and feels rather strongly that she's destined to be his Padawan, and basically begs his own master for permission to groom her into becoming his PA or some shit. But she says them lesbos ain't ever going to let her leave to go gallivanting across the stars with an old creepy Asian fella, so put your raging lob on away and shut up about it already. So after they once again test the girls and Osha passes with flying colours and is thus one step closer to getting herself trafficked across the fucking galaxy, Indara returns from a council meeting to say they're refusing to sanction the removal of a random child from a home and family just because an Asian bloke wants his own pet Padawan, and nor will they even let him come home early, which just further infuriates poor Torbin. And in a shocking twist what no one could ever see coming, the girl's blood work comes back showing that these local black kids totally ain't got a daddy.
No way!
Because turns out they were made out of thin air, aka the Vergence thing that they were looking to prove existed for all them weeks. So naturally, Torbin hops on his bike thing and rushes back over there, given they can finally go home if they just kidnap the girls and thereby totally get evidence of the Vergence. Which is music to Soul's ears, to be fair. And whilst it turns out that the little pyromaniac who locked her own sister in her room that one time only accidentally started the fire that eventually burned the whole place down, Indara desperately flies over to the temple and tells Kalnaka to go stop them mental mad lads from interfering with kiddies and starting an unnecessary conflict with a bunch of scary space witches with spiky heads. And as May runs out to ask for a hand, given she just dropped a giant fire lamp thing and now the gaff is getting torched worse than Michael Jackson's hair in the 80s Pepsi's advert, Torbin draws his weapon as Mother Anisha starts to cosplay as that naughty smoke monster from Lost back in the day, and is somehow killed when Master Soul stabs her smoke form in the chest, also somehow, which naturally kicks off a riot shitstorm, as the spiky lesbo starts smacking up the small Asian, who totally refuses to fight her, given I guess he only inflicts extreme violence on black women and shit. So she just decides to become smoke herself and then properly possesses the poor Jedi Wookiee fella, as the temple starts burning down all around him. And with the entire force of the Coven now supercharging her possession powers, the pair soon have to fend off their best hairy buddy with a dodgy CGI. And it looks like it's curtains for the dopey would-be child traffickers, until Indara leaps to the rescue and totally severs the possession connection, leading to their spirits being totally exorcised from Kalnaka's mind and also their own bodies. Or some shit. And before you can say, so much for the power of many,
the power of many.
Soul once again arrives to save the girls from dodgy bridges, but finds he's too weak to save them both. And instead of just using his force powers to lift the lighter girls rather than the super heavy steel infrastructure, he just lets the dodgy one, what loves torturing butterfly things and accidentally starting fires all around the gaff, totally fall down to her death.
Nice.
And after saving Osha and bringing her back to the ship to rest, Indara totally bollocks them for being so reckless that a simple peaceful research mission has led to the deaths of a dozen lesbians, a prepubescent child, and the total destruction of an ancient temple. And she just can't believe that she's the only one what didn't want to be there nor get involved with any of it, yet was the first to get revenge killed years later for her trouble. Nor can I believe that this was all the real reason that Torbin self-deleted all them years later, just because he made a few dumbass mistakes, and mainly due to him being effectively homesick and totally mindfucked by witches.
Really?
Anyway, so Indara decides to blame it all on May, and totally tell the council that it was the dead little kid what did all these bad things, mainly to save their own skin, but also so that they can protect Osha's dream of becoming a Jedi, and also having some kind of father figure in her life, and so at least some bloody good can come of all this death and devastation. And we end with Soul telling Osha all about her sister's naughty actions, as a truly awful modern day pop song plays out over the end credits of a supposed Star Wars show.
No!
Yeah. And they wonder why fans complain about how Disney Star Wars no longer feels like proper Star Wars. And that's it. That's the penultimate epi. Though my favourite part was when May ran over to her mum's dead body and was so sad that she couldn't even squeeze out a single tear.
Bruh.
Though at least we finally got to see a Wookiee Jedi have a saber fight and totally use a bit more of the Force and stuff. But anyway, on to the finale. We start with that lovable Asian scoundrel called Kaimi hauling his Magneto helmet off that Osha bird, given she keeps seeing haunting visions of the future where her sister is choking her old mentor Master Soul to death and says they need to get over there pronto. Meanwhile, in orbit over Brendok, Master Soul says he can finally prove the existence of Vergence once he gets hold of both twins. But before he can cry and whine some more about his guilty feelings, May breaks free from her binds and steals a fighter jet, and soon flies off through an asteroid field in the hopes of losing that pussy old Asian fella what keeps crying into his robes all day. But unfortunately, she just ends up crash landing on the planet like a right Wally.
No!
And once Osha once again declines to train with yet another Asian bloke, given she's been there and done that, and the last guy creepily kept a hologram of her in his pocket, they take off for Brendok in their ship, whilst some cave-dwelling spooky ghoul-type fella by the name of Darth Squatter or some shit, and who I assume was just stalking Quaimir and thus presumably also watching him skinny dip all the time, peeks around the cave wall to say if you're going out guys then pick me up a Big Mac or BV5 layers already. Whilst Master Soul has a bit of engine trouble after Basil the rat-faced weasel space otter thing sabotages his ship for literally no reason that's ever explained. And a little later, on said Brendok planet, both sets of Asian Masters and chocolatey acolytes eventually arrive at the ruins of the old temple, as Soul soon gets into a badass battle with Master Quaimir, who proceed to smack swords and then recklessly jump backwards off bridges and shit, whilst also showing off his mastery of force powers to smack a bitch up. Elsewhere, the twins reunite in their old bedroom. You know, the one where May started the fire that night that all their friends and family died horrifically in a burning blaze because she locked them in and stuff. As May tells Osha that Soul totally lied to her for years about what happened that evening, so no wonder she couldn't complete her Jedi training back in the day, nor control her emotions properly. And to prove she totally can control her emotions properly, Osha has a complete meltdown and launches into savage fisticuffs with her looky-likey doppelganger, and soon starts beating herself up. At first metaphorically, and then friggin' literally.
I am very aroused.
And back outside, Master Soul totally bests the naughty helmet head by slicing his sabre. And it looks like it's curtains for poor Jason Mendoza from The Good Place, who'll always be the dopey Jason Mendoza from The Good Place.
Hey homies, I love butts.
But unfortunately, May intervenes and easily disarms the old and busted Asian, as Quaimir encourages his old acolyte to yeet him already and totally complete their training. But she just says, nah bro, because I want him to confess about doing all these bad things to the council instead, and then do a lengthy jail sentence and shit. And as he explains how they aren't actually twins and are in fact the same person and an incredibly powerful product of the Force conjured into being by interracial lesbo space witches because reasons, she gets him to publicly confess about killing their mum that one time, which naturally enrages an earwig in Osha, until promptly chokes the life out of him Darth Vader style.
I understood that reference.
As she finally realises that it was of herself that she had a vision of earlier, totally eating this master guy. And May just can't believe he's now deaded when she wanted him to confess about doing all them bad things to the council and then do time in the Space Slammer. But at least now realises what it means to kill a Jedi without a weapon and stuff. And now having completed her turn to the dark side, given she's killed her own master and now also handily wearing black, she ends up bleeding a kyber crystal in his lightsaber after she got so angry she did a hate crime against a defenceless Asian. And the lightsaber soon mimics the UK government after the recent election and soon turns from blue to red. And before you can say, I can't believe an ex-Jedi has been corrupted by the Force and now become an all-powerful bad guy in a Star Wars story, Vernestra and accounts of Pussy old soy boys turn up, as she instantly senses her old ex-Padawan, given Chimere forgot to keep his helmet on. And after the kind of, sort of, but not really twins escape out the back door, given that's how Little May survived somehow and got out of the fire years ago also somehow, they end up back at the Golden Tree where they used to harass innocent flying bugs back in the day. Meanwhile, Vernestra arrives at the murder scene. Now all 4 OG Jedi initially targeted by the assassin for death are indeed totally deaded, and tells her soy squad to go find them naughty twins and totally use the tracker. And before you can say, he has a bloody name, you know.
That's puzzle.
May totally apologises for being a twisted fire starter back in the day, and thus completing her journey toward the light side. Whilst Osha agrees to train with Chimere, if he lets her sister go and erases her lifelong memory of all this utterly mental shit, given the Jedi will inevitably use her to find him. And before she can say, oh, well, can you at least let me remember my PIN code? He indeed gives her a quick lobotomy, and leaves her more lost and confused than the current POTUS. And unable to finish a coherent sentence, also like the current POTUS.
Dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
And as they totally leave the vulnerable dementia patient lost and alone in the middle of the woods, the soy boy Jedi turns up and declares she's under arrest. But naturally, she has no idea what for, so just asks,
What did I do?
And before he can say, how about setting a giant fuck off fire, what killed a dozen space lesbians, poisoned a sleepy Caucasian soy boy who had literal white guilt, and later went on a serial killing rampage where you bumped off Hollywood star Carrie-Anne Moss before the opening credits of the first fucking episode, we cut over to Coruscant, as Vernestra can't get anything out of this brain-fried potato who now has a literal mental age of an 8-year-old, so instead tells her how great Master Soul was, given he's the last memory she has in her noggin, before immediately publicly trashing the dead man's reputation and lifelong legacy, as she soon tells the Senate Tribunal that this fella went rogue and also on a mass killing spree to try and cover up his past crimes and stuff. Because after all, she only cares about political optics, bro, and needs to protect the wider reputation of the whole Jedi Republic, even if it does mean trashing your best friend of 20 years and conveniently blaming it all on the dead guy what can't speak up to defend himself.
Oh, that's cold.
And we end with the lovable Asian scoundrel and his new acolyte holding hands and ready to be evil by the beach, as the baldy betrayer goes off to visit some small hairy green fella called Yoda or some shit. And that's it. That's the final epi. Though my favourite part was the totally cringy Power of Many song slapped over the end credits. Because I ain't seen cringy chanting like that since the Rings of Power a few years back.
C is always right.
The sea is always right.
Oh, good lord!
But anyway, that's the plot and that's your lot. Considering that bell thing so you don't miss any future recaps. Tell me if you like this show in the comments if you have time. And I'll get mind fucked by lesbo space witches with you in the next one.